Litigation and the pro wrestling industry are no strangers to each other, with wrestlers suing promotions, promotions suing wrestlers, and wrestlers suing each other for various reasons for decades. Somewhat rarer is when a fan will decide to take a bone bender to court, though such cases are far from unheard of and often result in a wrestler being ordered to cough up after bringing a harsh dose of reality into their world of fantasy. Other times, not so much. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers who were sued by fans. Join us. Number 10, Jim Duggan. Mid-South Wrestling booker Cowboy Bill Watts had a rule that said any wrestler who lost a bar fight would be fired, since it would diminish the wrestler's credibility in the eyes of the fans once word got out. Not sure Watts had a rule about attacking fans in the crowd though. Hacksaw Jim Duggan was working as a heel during a tag team main event at a show in Monroe, Louisiana in the mid-80s when he was struck in the face by a cup of ice. Identifying 17-year-old fan Victor Caldwell as the culprit, Duggan vowed to get the son of a bitch and made a beeline for him, only to be cut off by Caldwell's brother-in-law, the 40-year-old Donald Sills. According to eyewitness accounts, Hacksaw rocked Sills, who had adopted a defensive position, with 2 punches to his eye, causing an orbital floor fracture. Sills sued Duggan in Mid-South, with a Louisiana court ultimately finding Big Jim responsible, surmising that he had instigated the confrontation and used excessive force. The trial court ordered that Hacksaw pay Sills $25,432. Duggan naturally appealed the ruling, but his appeal was denied. No! Number 9, Triple H and The Rock. Most fans remember the Judgment Day 2000 Iron Man match main event between world champion The Rock and Triple H for its frantic ending, which saw the return of The Undertaker in his new American badass guise. For one fan who was there that night, however, the match was remembered for something else entirely. In 2011, 17-year-old Ronald Basham, no relation to Danny and Doug, sued WWE, The Rock, and Triple H for an injury he allegedly suffered while the two men were brawling in the crowd that night. Accusing the 3 parties of reckless, willful, and wanton conduct, Basham claimed that the in-crowd brawling caused a chain reaction that resulted in a woman falling on top of him, resulting in the then 7-year-old sustaining leg and knee injuries that cost his family some $37,000 in medical bills. Basham and his attorney Harris Berman accused WWE of failing to properly stage the match or provide adequate security for fans. However, days after the suit was filed, TMZ reported that Basham not only played high school football, but also raced and crashed stock cars. This was a hobby that was well documented on his Facebook page, and might have played a part if the suit actually made it to court, which I'm pretty sure it didn't. Number 8, Paul White. Following the June 15, 1998 edition of WCW Monday Nitro, Paul White, aka The Giant, went to check into the nearby Marriott Hotel when he was approached by an unruly fan. 30-year-old Robert Sawyer was no small man, standing 6'6" and weighing in at 225 pounds, but he paled in comparison to White. Nonetheless, Sawyer, who later admitted that he had been drinking at the Nitro taping, confronted the Giant in the crowded hotel bar and began peppering him with insults. White asked him to stop, but when Sawyer got physical with a shove, White responded in kind, dropping the fan with a big punch that broke his jaw. That punch landed White in the Nassau Criminal Court on 3rd-degree assault charges. After reviewing the hotel's CCTV footage, however, Judge Thomas Feynman dismissed the charges against White, who had since left WCW and signed with the WWF, calling Sawyer irrational and out of control on the night of the incident. Sawyer, who had tried to start with Kevin Nash earlier in the night, was found to have caused the confrontation, and White had simply acted in self-defense. Number 7, Ron Garvin. Rugged Ronnie Garvin was a surly fella whose offense seemed to predominantly consist of meticulous and very stiff strikes designed to wear down his opponent. When Garvin was wrestling for the Georgia Championship Wrestling promotion on a show in Wheeling, West Virginia on August 8, 1983, he used one of those strikes to subdue a fan he felt was getting a little bit too close for comfort. Ron got into a heated confrontation with a 19-year-old fan called Argyle Johnson, who he ended up headbutting during their altercation. Johnson claimed that other fans and wrestlers witnessed the attack, which gave him no major injuries but left him in considerable pain. The The case eventually made it to court 4 years later, where a judge found Garvin liable and ordered him to pay Johnson $455,000 in damages, plus court fees. However, Johnson's lawyer expressed doubt that his client would ever receive any of the money, since Garvin didn't show up to the trial or respond to any notices regarding the case. You see, kids, if you ignore something for long enough, it just sort of goes away. Number 6. Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam was ordinarily a pretty chill guy, but he was legitimately tough too, and if somebody messed with his zen mind state, he was liable to ask them to pick a hand. Not just wrestlers either, but evidently fans too. Prior to wrestling Bobby Duncombe Jr. at a show in Allentown, Pennsylvania on July 12, 1997, RVD was cutting a promo when a fan dumped a bottle of water over his head. Van Dam, who was then portraying a heel defector that occasionally appeared on WWF TV, ripped the fan's shirt and spit in his face in retaliation. The fan, feeling he had been assaulted, subsequently sued ECW and RVD. According to the whole flipping show, the fan wildly embellished his story in court, claiming that Van Dam picked him up over his head, spun him around, and then slammed him into the guardrail. The fan ultimately ended up winning some just piss off money, though ECW paid it, not the performer. Even more mental, the cheeky bastard would then later show up at ECW shows holding a sign that said, "I sued RVD." In 2007, Van Dam was once again sued by a fan who claimed that he had spat at her during his entrance at WrestleMania 23, though it looks like that one was a non-starter. Number 5. The Sandman. The Sandman's epic entrance was, truth be told, typically the high point of his entire act. Sauntering through the crowd with a lit cigarette on his lips while drinking a beer as Metallica's Enter Sandman roared, it was an immersive experience for those in the arena. A little bit too immersive for fan Carleen Boutwell, who claimed the Sandman assaulted her while making his way to the ring at the ECW on Sci-Fi taping in Nashville on August 8, 2006. Boutwell claimed that the wrestler had picked her up and threw her down, which was not only humiliating but also injured her in a lawsuit that she filed against the Sandman and WWE in April of 2007. WWE denied the claims and offered video evidence of the entrance as proof, while also stating that they were not liable for any attack since the Sandman was an independent contractor, not an employee. Boutwell was seeking $100,000 in damages, but ended up being ordered to pay all court costs when her case was thrown out in April of 2008. Hey, she may have won had WWE not had clear video evidence that everything she said was a falsehood. Number 4. Jerry Lawler. The controversial king of professional wrestling was no stranger to legal trouble during his long and colourful career. Lawler had faced several lawsuits for various reasons and had filed a few of his own, but felt the wrath of a ripped-off fan when his in-ring days were all but over. In the summer of 2019, Jerry's former podcast host Glenn Moore was accused of scamming Lawler's fans out of thousands of dollars by selling them artwork done by the king and then never sending it out. Jason Laurie was one such fan who paid around $1,500 for a piece he never received, a painting of his beloved cat, and filed suit against Lawler and Moore. Lawler said that he was shocked by the accusations and unaware of Moore's scam. He offered to do the painting Laurie had paid for, but claimed that Laurie was only interested in getting his money back. Jerry's legal team advised him to settle for the $1,500, but Lawler decided to listen to what the judge had to say and was pleased when he ruled that Moore did not class as an agent but as a loose facilitator for Lawler, and that Laurie's suit did not meet the burden of proof. Moore, meanwhile, disappeared off the grid and was a no-show in court. Number 3. Randy Savage. If I had to choose one word to describe Randy Savage, it would be wrestler. But if you ask me for a better, more descriptive word, I would go for intense. The Macho Man was wound up tighter than an 8-day clock and liable to snap at any moment. That moment came on April 30th, 1986, prior to Savage's Intercontinental title defense against Tito Santana in Fresno, California. According to reports, Randy was hit with a flying soda when he turned around and threw out a punch at who he suspected were the offending fans. Unfortunately, they ducked, and he ended up hitting 14-year-old Barbara Cope, whose stepfather worked as event security and was friendly with many of the wrestlers by accident. She was knocked out cold, had her 2 front teeth knocked out, and suffered a concussion. Decades later, she still had issues with her right eye. Cope's family subsequently filed suit against the WWF and Savage, who felt terrible about the incident. They eventually settled for $6,000, though Barbara herself never saw a dime after fees and costs, and her family using some of the money on a failed business venture. Number 2. Stan Lane. On May 29, 1987, the Rock and Roll Express defeated the Midnight Express in the main event of a house show for Jim Crockett Promotions at the Civic Center in Beckley, West Virginia. A routine piece of business for two teams that had met countless times, but the post-match scene did not match the nightly script. After a fan had thrown a wooden aisle marker that struck the shoulder of beautiful Bobby Eaton into the ring, Sweet Stan Lane jumped into the crowd to defend his tag partner's honor. Regrettably, he got the wrong guy and ended up punching Roy Massey, a disabled coal miner in his 60s, square in the face. The blow fractured Massey's orbital bone along with injuring other bones in his face, landing him in the hospital for 8 days. Massey and his wife duly filed suit against Lane, JCP, and the security company hired for the event. The case ended up going to the West Virginia Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of Massey while finding all defendants responsible to a certain degree. In a 2001 shoot interview, Lane claimed to have paid Massey $450,000 to settle rather than go to court and be held liable for substantially more, as Massey was seeking $6 million in damages. Number 1. Kevin Nash. It was a common sight during the Monday Night War days to see the villainous New World Order showered with paper, cups, and other debris as they ran roughshod over WCW. It was a sign that the NWO had seriously strong heat, but the wrestlers themselves can't have liked it. Kevin Nash certainly didn't appreciate it when he, Scott Hall, and Six-Pack invaded MTV's coverage of Spring Break in 1997. After one unruly fan threw a rock at his head, Big Sexy jumped off the stage, ran after him, and threw him down hard in the sand, while Hall chastised the lax security presence and threatened to leave if it didn't improve. The teenager was arrested for throwing the rocks and spent 9 months in jail for it, per Nash, but he and his parents decided to file legal action against Nash and WCW afterwards. Kev called the kid's lawyer, who had not been made aware of his client's arrest, and agreed to settle for $1, which the lawyer, who was afraid of his client being countersued, quickly agreed to. Nash also sent the kid a letter written in red crayon.